Welcome to Proof of Ergo, episode 9. I'm James Kever, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in, because today we're doing things just a little bit differently. We've got an extensive interview with Dan Friedman about Zengate Global. That's his new startup that aims to bring Ergo to the masses through several different innovative projects. We also speak to Gazza, the community manager for Spectrum, formerly known as Ergodex. He tells us about changes for their decentralized exchange. Ergo Node 5.0 is out, and we'll tell you what changes to expect with that. And finally, Babel Fees. What are they and how do they work on Ergo? All coming up in just a few moments. But first, a quick reminder, we're on all the major podcast platforms for both video and audio-only versions of the show. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, you know how much we really appreciate you smashing that like button and making sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our content. And if you see something you like, or if there's a project you'd like to see a segment on, please leave a comment in the comment section or reach out to us on Twitter at Proof of Ergo. We would love to hear from you there as well. All right, it's been an incredibly active year for development on the Ergo platform. New dApps are launching on the blockchain. Ergopad, sponsors of this show, actively promoting new projects through IDOs. Ergo hacks attracting more and more developers, and just the innovation coming out of these competitions are really mind-blowing, like the random number generator from Night Owl that we covered not too long back. The future looks very, very bright for Ergo. Recently, Alex Chupranoy tweeted about the activation of version 5.0 on the Ergo testnet. Now, this news is incredibly important as it signals steps are underway to launch the next significant update for the Ergo blockchain. Ergo has already executed a massive reshuffling of the Erg emission schedule with Ergo Improvement Proposal 27. But Chupranoy and the rest of the core developers continue to work tirelessly to build a blockchain with innovative and novel technology. And to that end, version 5.0 activation will improve costing on the Ergo blockchain, which has to do with accurately assessing the cost to execute the contract. Smart contracts need to consistently be verified for their legitimacy, and these actions have real costs on the blockchain. If left unchecked, the cost for checking the validity of smart contracts can have the potential to negatively impact the efficiency and even the security of the blockchain. Now, there are two methods most common for controlling costs. Those are ahead of time costing, and this one estimates the cost before the script is executed and even rejects it if it's determined to be too expensive. The other method is just-in-time costing, which calculates cost during the actual execution of the script. The testnet activation of version 5.0 employs a hybrid of these two costing methods. The process starts with just-in-time costing, where transaction inputs go through a verifier, one input after another, and each input's script is basically written into the contract. Once all the inputs for the transaction are processed, ahead-of-time costing is applied to determine the costs in the transaction in question. All costs are then added together to determine the final cost of the transaction itself. Once the final cost of the transaction is obtained, it's added to the block cost, which has to be within the block budget before it can be added to it. Alex Chupranoy said these improvements will depend for some contracts versus others. Some contracts are hit really hard by ahead-of-time costing and could see up to 10 times in costing improvements. He went on to say the goal of the hybrid costing system is to increase the efficiency of the blockchain by improving the number of transactions per block, while at the same time reducing the costs of smart contracts. The speed at which Ergo moves never ceases to amaze. For a blockchain with a mainnet just over 3 years old and the sheer number of active projects on Ergo, it's just mind-blowing considering the uptime and security of the protocol. But sometimes progress requires a name change. Calling in today is Gazza. He's a community manager for the decentralized exchange Spectrum, formerly known as Ergodex. They've got a new name, a whole new look and feel, and a whole bunch of new features on the way. Gazza, thank you so much for calling in today.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
So it wasn't too long back, we spoke with Yasha Black, one of the developers on the Spectrum team. He was the first to mention changes were coming, and here we are. It's a beautiful rebrand, if you ask me. It looks great, but there still might be some confusion out there about why rebrand in the first place, and I was hoping you could just quickly touch on that.
Yeah, sure. So the main reason, I suppose, is that there has been a lot of confusion for quite a while now about us having Ergo in the name. People are thinking we were part of the core Ergo team, which we aren't. We're just a dApp building on top of Ergo. But I suppose our future is going to be cross-chain. So we're also building on Cardano. So I think it made sense for us to rebrand and get a new identity going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So for right now, it's just a new look and feel, but there's some incredible features your team has been working on. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So what we're doing at the moment is we're splitting up into two development paths. We're making Spectrum Network, which is going to be our new layer 2 solution, and Spectrum Finance, which is going to be all our dApps, such as our decentralized exchange and our wallet, and other new features that'll be coming in the next few years.
Awesome. Yeah, layer 2. I mean, that's a buzzword these days, isn't it? Everyone's throwing it around like it's the holy grail of blockchain. So I'm real excited to ask you, especially since Spectrum aims to be a layer 2 solution, what does that really mean to the layman?
So a layer 2 is it's a kind of higher order chain. It just allows dApp developers to take a lot of the computational power off of the layer 1 blockchain, such as Ergo or Cardano. Because working on a blockchain is quite expensive. It's hard to get programs that run well within the memory limits. So with our layer 2 Spectrum Network, we'll be able to design it from the ground up to allow more complex contracts going forward.
So are you talking about like a separate chain with a separate consensus?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be using a role DPoS consensus method.
All right, so you'll be able to stake the coin that you're eventually going to be having for the Spectrum.
Exactly. So our token is going to be called the SPF token. It's going to be released pretty soon now. We're in the final stages of figuring out how to release on both chains. Is kind of the difficulty with it. So that's coming out soon, and that'll be the lifeblood of our Spectrum Network Layer 2 solution.
Perfect. Now, let's talk about Catalyst funding. Catalyst is Cardano's kind of governance fund. You were in Fund 9. Can you talk about what those funds would be used for?
So those funds are going to be used for building Spectrum Network, our Layer 2 solution. We're using it to pay for Rust developers. We have a few brilliant ones we want to keep on. We're hoping to have our testnet ready by the end of this year. So hopefully we'll have something to show you pretty soon.
Excellent. Now this is the question I'm excited about. You guys have been working on the Rosen Bridge now for a while. This is going to bridge Cardano and Ergo assets. Can you talk about where your team is at on this project?
Yeah, so it's actually working on the Ergo local mainnet now and the Cardano testnet. So there's actually been the first test transaction has actually happened now on the Cardano dev testnet. So it's a big step forward. It's great to see it actually come to fruition after all this time of development by MHS Sam and his team of developers.
Now, is this bridge Vasil dependent, or will it happen after Vasil or before Vasil, or it really doesn't matter?
This is completely independent from that. All this bridge requires is smart contracts that already exist on the Ergo platform and a multi-sig wallet on any other target chain.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. All right, so in the very first interview we did with Ergodex, we spoke with Ilya, and he had mentioned decentralized exchange option vaults. Basically options like calls and puts on the stock market, as I understand it, but built completely on the Ergo blockchain. Can you update us on how this is going?
Yeah, so we ran into problems building these contracts. They just got too complex to run on the base layer 1 solutions that we had available. So that was actually the main motivation behind Spectrum Network, the layer 2 solution. So we were able to build it from the ground up, and it'll be ready for DeFi, that the complexity that we need to build these contracts.
So that was kind of what was behind creating this second layer solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's really cool. All right, so the Spectrum team has teamed up with Ergopad, sponsors of this show, for an accelerator program. What's an accelerator program, Gazza, and can you talk more about this partnership with Ergopad?
Yeah, so we just saw all the projects that I'm launching with IDO through Ergopad, and they're doing a fantastic job of bringing projects to the ecosystem. Like, they're vetting them. They're producing great projects coming out. So we just found that we have quite a bit of reach in the ecosystem, and since we're going cross-chain, we have a bit of reach there as well in the future. We found we can bring a lot to these projects, such as marketing, creating relationships with different projects that we've worked with also. And so we're also building a custom yield liquidity mining program. So that's nearing final stage of development now. So what that'll do is, after IDO of a project, they can assign a certain amount of tokens to be added to the liquidity pool. When people add liquidity, they then get paid out a share of the project tokens. So it's a good way to disperse project tokens going forward after IDO.
Exciting times ahead. Community manager for Spectrum, the native DeFi ecosystem that, among other things, is going to bridge Ergo and Cardano. Gazza, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me, James.
Ergo's about to implement Babel Fees, and there's a lot of excitement about them. So I thought now would be a good time to talk about what they are. First, though, let's consider a common problem for cryptocurrency holders. Say you want to buy or sell one cryptocurrency, but you need another to pay the transaction or gas fees. Well, Babel Fees allow you to trade a small amount of the cryptocurrency you have into the one needed to push the transaction through. The way it works on a high level is someone offers to exchange some of the cryptocurrency needed to use the blockchain for the currency that you have. Now, these offers are put on the blockchain, and your wallet will show you the price in the cryptocurrency you hold to make the exchange. And it all happens as part of the transaction, which is created and handled by your wallet. Now, because it's created as part of the transaction, you know in advance whether Babel Fees can be used at all and how much it's going to cost. So let's get a little more technical, talk about what's going on under the hood. Someone's basically offering a deal to trade what you have for what you need, which has a predefined price ratio. This will determine how much to charge you in the crypto you hold for the Ergo that you'll need to execute the transaction. So let's say I have a wallet full of Ergopad and I want to send it all to another wallet. Well, I need some Ergo to pay the transaction fee. My wallet will look for offers that live on the blockchain that will trade enough Ergo that I need to transact for some of the Ergopad that I hold. Turns out, hypothetically speaking, there's a contract with the predefined price ratio of one Ergopad for enough Ergo to pay the transaction fee and push the transaction through. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how it will work. Interesting side note, if the predefined prices are different from the decentralized exchange price at the time, there's a profit motive involved and an economic incentive to arbitrage using bots. And bots are actually one of the advantages to Ergo's implementation of Babel Fees. Not only do they introduce profit opportunities like what I just mentioned, they can also be used to minimize slippage. Now, currently, Ergo Improvement Proposal 0031, which lays all of this out, is still being discussed, so stay tuned to Proof of Ergo for more information on when we can expect to see Babel Fees in the wild. Most of you know him from the weekly Ergo updates and the YouTube show Ergo Pulse, but he also works with the folks over at Input-Output Global, one of the teams behind Cardano, and is diligently developing on Ergo from the other side of the world in Japan. His name is Dan Friedman, and recently Dan announced a new suite of software solutions all under the umbrella of Zengate Global, with the overall objective of ushering commercial adoption of Ergo and the Ergo blockchain. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show to answer our questions.
Thanks for having me, James. And I'm actually representing right here the Ergoverse. This is one of our limited edition Ergo shirts from the meetup in Austin. Still going to be raffling those off at some point in a not too distant future.
Awesome.
Well, soon. I don't want to make it make it sound like it's going to be years or something. We'll do it in a couple of weeks.
Dan, I'm real interested in Zengate Global. I watched the YouTube announcement video, which of course I'll link to in the description, but maybe you can explain for those who haven't seen the video, what is Zengate Global?
Well, Zengate Global is, in a way, the unofficial commercial arm, or what I would like it to become, is the unofficial commercial arm of the Ergo ecosystem. Basically, Ergo is a very decentralized ecosystem, and so with that, you don't have more central companies like, say, IOG. There is no IOG in the Ergo ecosystem. There is no Cardano Foundation, although there is the Ergo Foundation. The Ergo Foundation is different from the Cardano Foundation. They basically have just enough resources to make sure that the ecosystem is properly guided, and so it's a different, it's just a different approach to what the foundation gets involved in.
Now, how did you come up with the idea?
Well, look, I am a commercial guy, and when I saw Ergo, I mean, I followed Ergo from the beginning because Alex, I worked with Alex, since 2016. And when he came up with Ergo, I followed it. We actually followed it at IOG. Charles has always been a huge fan. And so I just been watching it grow, and I saw how decentralized the system was. And so from one hand, that's great. I mean, that's what makes it an amazing ecosystem, is the amount of decentralization, the amount of freedom that you have within the ecosystem. On the other hand, however, it is not easy for a new ecosystem to bring in more usability in a grassroots type of way. So without involving VCs, without centralizing, basically, to keep that whole beautiful decentralized feel to it, while growing the ecosystem more exponentially, right? So it doesn't take 10 years for it to grow. It takes a few years for it to grow. For that, you need commercial adoption. And although there are great projects on Ergo, I'm a fan of Night Owl Casino. I'm a fan of Ergoland, Sky Harbor. I mean, there's a lot of great projects on Ergo, Ergopad, that are commercially oriented, very cool, utilizing all the different tools that Ergo has to offer. I would like to see more of just the big boy adoption in Ergo worldwide, national level adoption of Ergo, because that's what this ecosystem deserves. And of course, that's not going to be done just because, look, I don't believe in one blockchain to rule them all. I believe that Ergo is a very strong ecosystem, but I really also love how we're all part of the EUTXO alliance, right? So we got all these other blockchains and these other ecosystems that are symbiotic with Ergo, like Cardano, for example, like Nervos, like Coty, these other ecosystems that are operating within the same within the same community in a way, because let's say a lot of Ergo people are also Cardano people and vice versa. So I believe that if I can be centric, I can be Ergo-centric, and also utilize other tools in the EUTXO ecosystem to really harness the power of the entire ecosystem and to bring more adoption to Ergo, basically kind of using all these different tools that are available, and so that Ergo doesn't have to be kind of singled out and have to do things on their own. I can bring in this mass adoption that I'm talking about, this national level, this corporate level mass adoption of Ergo using these tools. And so that was the thought behind Zengate, is to really kind of put my commercial knowledge into creating a global level entity to really drive adoption of Ergo and utilizing the entire EUTXO community in the process.
It's certainly ambitious, Dan. I want to set up some context here. A lot of people are already familiar with your work these days with Ergo, but it didn't start there. Can you talk about your background a little bit and how your relationship with Input Output Global began?
Sure. Input Output, I've been at Input Output pretty much since the beginning of Input Output. I believe that they started input output late 2015. I started early 2016. I was one of the first 10 employees at input output, including Charles, if you count Charles as employee of input output. And I came in when it was just really humble beginnings for input output for Cardano. When really we were just running the second tranche of the pre-sale. Nobody really knew about us except for the small Japanese community that was participating in the pre-sale. People knew Charles from Ethereum, but again, at that point, 2016, you still didn't have as much buzz around blockchain as you do today. So it almost felt very fringe, very almost bleeding edge, the type of stuff that we were doing. And I was not happy in the path that my professional career was taken. I just decided to say, hey, I need to switch gears. I need to look for new opportunities. And through a mutual friend, I found Input Output Japan, who was at that point, was only a couple of people, and they were developing the pre-sale app that was running the entire pre-sale, and they needed a project manager. So at that point, I was actually working as a CTO of a Japanese company in Osaka, in southern Osaka. And I thought that this looked promising. This looked really cool. It actually took me a little bit of time to really get it. Just took a lot of reading, because the first thing I looked at input output, and I said, okay, so blockchain. Okay, I kind of get what that's about. I know, but Bitcoin. I mean, I get the general. I wasn't bitten by the blockchain bug, the crypto bug back then just yet. I'm a developer by trade, so I kind of knew the mechanics behind it. But I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, so the software is open source. That's brave, because I come from a world of not open source. Working in the corporate environment, nothing is really open source. In fact, it's highly protected source code. But I was just kind of captivated by it. And after speaking with Charles, my first interview was with Charles's former business partner, Jeremy Wood, and the second one was actually with Charles, and that was kind of my really changing point, because after speaking to Charles, I know I've worked with a lot of quote unquote visionaries, and a lot of people who talk a big game, but really just that it's complete BS. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. With Charles, he had this really grand, wide, like a really, really grand vision. This big vision, very detailed, very optimistic about it. And I would think that this would set off a bunch of red flags for me, because I'm always very, very conservative about this kind of business. But just the way what he was saying was really kind of, didn't seem like BS. It seemed like he was really capable of doing it. And so I came away from that meeting kind of thinking, wow, this is cool. This guy might be the guy. This one might be the real thing. And so I joined Input Output. I ran the pre-sale, the app that ran the pre-sale, which basically did everything from KYC, AML to individual vouchers that turned into ADA, to managing different distributors that were working with us. Just basically the entire thing. Everything was run by this thing called the pre-sale app. And so when we successfully launched, I started doing other things in the company. I started doing more of kind of a facilitation, liaisoning within the company, kind of trying to create processes and things of that nature. And one thing led to another. And when we started getting more infrastructure in place, I switched over more towards the commercial end, and sort of creating a business development workflow, because up until that point, it was basically, Charles would just get swamped with emails. He'd get swamped with people, wanting to talk to him after his talks that he would give, and we'd get a lot of really interesting leads, but he's just one man, and then he was working with, and then later on, Josh Miller came on board. He was at that point with Charles's EA. Now he's the NFT lead of Input Output. But again, Josh is also one man, can't process this high volume of leads. So I kind of plugged myself in and I said, hey, let's get this going. And I just kind of one thing led to another. And I kind of started to work as the commercial arm of Input Output. And again, we started getting more infrastructure. I started getting more help. But at one point, it was just me. I was Daniel Friedman. So at first, it was Daniel Friedman Project Manager. Then it went from Daniel Friedman Project Manager to Daniel Friedman Business Development. And I came up with that title. And I'll tell you why. I didn't want to be the Business Development Director. I didn't want to be the Business Development Manager, because that specifies a particular structure, which I didn't want people to limit me to. I wanted to be the guy they talk to take the pressure off of Charles. And so that's why it was just Daniel Friedman Business Development. And so I switched gears onto that, and slowly but surely we expanded the commercial department, which is pretty robust right now at Input Output. And so here we are.
And how did you switch over to the Ergo side of things?
So as I was saying, I've been following Ergo since the beginning. And also, like I said, Charles is a big fan. We are also always trying to kind of see how we can work with Alex. And so finally, was about 7-8 months ago, I believe. I have personal friends who are really highly invested in Ergo, other community members who are also really into Ergo. And a couple of my really close friends just started talking to me, and they said, Dan, just Ergo needs just these couple of nice boosts to really, it's the real deal. And so, of course, yeah, I get it. I get this is the real deal. This is not your, VC pumped, hype blockchains of the world. This is the real deal. This is the kind of technology that was really is built to last. When you know. And so they just said, hey, why don't you just talk to them and just say, hey, why don't I just help you guys out the way what I did for Cardano, what I did for Input Output in a way, which is just to kind of try to facilitate, try to use my connections, use my business skills that I've developed over several years of kind of helping Cardano come out of obscurity into what it is today. And yeah, I just contacted Alex. I said, hey, why don't I work with you guys? Well, I love the project. I think the potential is huge. You just need to have that business development, that commercial organization that needs to happen anytime you have an ecosystem that needs to take that boost. Even with Bitcoin, if you think about it, really, the real adoption began when the hash rate went up, right? So basically, you had more people mining, and it was a lot more organic because the first thing was Bitcoin. But still, the more commercialization came to actually trying to get these things more orderly. I'm not saying all of it was for the better. Sometimes you had an disproportionate amount of mining going on, and so on and so forth. But really, when some of these entities started to commercialize in a way, you got a lot more, the network became more robust. Then more dev teams came on, more products were being built on the Bitcoin network. And that's really when it started to expand. That's what really any organic network needs. It can grow organically, but you need that commercial adoption, commercialization to come in. And so, like I said, that's Alex knows what I can do, and then, like I said, we've been working for years, and my mission was to bring it to Ergo. The more I got involved with Ergo, the more I fell in love with everything about Ergo. And it's been a great and amazing several months, and I'm almost, we're going to be probably close to a year soon in the next few months. And I'm just super excited about where it's going. I really feel that early Bitcoin / Cardano vibe from this ecosystem. And when I'm talking Cardano, I'm talking like 2017, late 2017, like right after mainnet launch, Cardano. And I know we got some people are going to say, well, Cardano didn't launch with all this tooling. I know that is the beauty of Ergo, okay? But not everybody is a twin of everybody else, okay? Everybody has a different story. I'm talking about the general, the buzz around the community, because really the difference between all the other technologies and this technology that we're dealing with is the community, because this is by far the most community driven technology out of any technology out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And this is off script. I apologize. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I hope I'm not upsetting any of the Cardano maxis out there, but when you consider that Ergo is 3 years old, mainnet is just a little over 3 years old, moving at light speed, you've got all of these projects just going so fast. And Cardano, I mean, it's a research-driven approach that moves a little bit more slower. In some respects, I wonder, though, do you think Cardano's maybe over-engineered in some respects, especially when you consider how fast the two projects are how fast Ergo is moving as compared to Cardano?
Well, one of the reasons Ergo is moving as fast as it's moving is because the same guys that were researching Cardano, mainly Alex, is building Ergo. It comes from the same type of mind. What Cardano is doing is I don't think it's being over-engineered, and I believe that right now is the time when people are starting to realize it more and more and more, now that more functionality is coming out, more more robustness is coming into the network. And all around, you see all these hacks, you see these crashes, you see these huge blockchain ecosystem just dumping and going to zero, okay? You understand the importance of it. It feels like it's taken a while, but what I always say is, look, if you're building an ecosystem to last generations, I mean, how many generations has the legacy banking system lasted? How many generations? You're building a new financial paradigm, a new financial and socioeconomic ecosystem. This is supposed to last generations. Who cares about 5 years? If it took 5 years, if it takes 10 years to develop, who cares? If you're talking about 100, if you're talking about 100 years of ironclad evolution of the legacy financial and banking and socioeconomic system, you're talking about, I mean, look, I know some people just get a little bit, feel that's a little bit corny. I don't care about those people, but we are changing the world. We are. This is what it is. This is a paradigm shift, a world-changing technology, and that's what you have to look at. You have to look at it that way. The world-changing technology, like the internet, for example. The internet started in the 60s. How long did it take for the internet to actually go to consumer, to the consumer end? Late 90s, right? I was on the internet in like 93, 94. I mean, it was just, it was mostly porn, but it just, there was a couple of things there.
I mean, I remember the chat rooms. It was all text-based when I first, AOL and.
Well, look, I was there on Usenet before that, and you had all these chat rooms on Usenet. You had dial-up, you had BBSs, you had Sanitarium, you had Freetown. I was on that, I was on that back in like 91. I was dialing up with my 2400 baud, trying to get cheat codes for Quest for Glory and Sierra Games. I mean, I was there, but really, you think about this, a technology that was developed in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, as a military network, evolved to what the internet is today, and really went mainstream 30 years later. 30 years later, it took that whole thing 30 years to progress, to develop to a point of where it could finally meet mass adoption. Who cares about 10 years? Who cares about 5 years? Because if you build it right, it will work. And the internet wasn't all built right, but at least the TCP/IP protocol was built well enough for it to be sustainable.
All right, I could talk to you forever, Dan, because you're just such an interesting guy, but let's go back to Zengate. And you mentioned a bunch of different products under Zengate Global, so I'm just gonna kind of rapid fire ask you to explain a couple of them. And one of them you mentioned is the Geo Anchored Metaverse. Now, everyone's all about the metaverse these days. How is this one different?
Well, this one is different by the fact that it's actually a digital representation of the actual landscape, of the actual geographical landscape of the country that it's being rolled out at. This is meant for national adoption, right? So basically a national metaverse, or at least for something like a large region, like for example, a Japanese prefecture, the Osaka prefecture, the Wakayama prefecture, that is then divided into smaller districts. So with that, if you actually create a digital representation in the metaverse of the actual landscape, of the way it's broken up, of the way jurisdictions work, of the way different parts of it work, you then create opportunities for more location-based services. For example, land deed registration, for things like escrow. You create opportunities for tourism, for example. You can build you have a digital representation of your hotel in the metaverse, and when somebody is actually entering that particular part of the physical universe, that is then represented in the metaverse, they can then have different services, different opportunities be presented to them because of where they are. And again, this is something that could go anywhere from on-demand shopping, on-demand registration in a hotel, for example, if it's a hotel, on-demand registration, keyless registration, to what I call a B2R, blockchain to reality, which basically where you use blockchain to manipulate reality. I call it B2R. And so with that, you can even have things like digital keys that are then activated because your registration through the metaverse and your geographic position where you are physically, that can recognize that you are the person that registered to this room, and you can use your phone to open the lock.
I love this vision about making it national. You've mentioned this a couple times, offering government type services. I'm curious, because you're actually talking about working with the government, what do you think of mixers? I mean, governments hate them. They're often the first place fraudsters go to wash their crypto. We did see that with the couple in Manhattan who allegedly tried to launder $4.5 billion in stolen crypto. Do you think mixers are worth the government scrutiny?
I think that it all depends on the mixer. I mean, in general, a mixer, I think, is, if you really think about what crypto is, which is a P2P cash, it's a P2P currency. What it's supposed to be is a P2P currency. Just as it's basically a digital representation of cash. Now, is splitting up $100 bill into 10 tens money laundering?
Maybe, maybe not. No, not on the surface.
It depends on the intent. You see, it depends on the intent. Okay, you can money launder money that way, But just the fact that you can do it doesn't make it a tool made for money laundering. So a mixer, say the Ergo mixer, is kind of the same thing. It's basically you don't want to reveal. So okay, when you're using cash, again, when you go to the store, would you feel weird if the person at the counter told you, show me your bank statement?
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
Well, this is basically what the government is saying. Oh, you're using cash, but you're not showing your bank statement. That's bad. Well, no, that's how cash works. And this is P2P cash. Crypto is P2P cash. So and you don't have to show your original funds, right? You don't have to show what is in your wallet. You only have to show what you are looking to spend. So in that, I think if they understand that and they focus more on the criminal and not the method, I mean, of course, take into account the method, understand the method, but focus more on what else allowed them to do what they did. Because it's not just because there was a mixer, because, criminals will find other ways to do criminal stuff. That's just the nature of the beast. Okay, criminals always find a way. There is no absolute law. So I think that, of course, it cannot all be just a free for all. Go away, government, don't touch us. We're all just going to live here on our patches of land and grow tomatoes and be jolly. But with that, yeah, the government really needs to kind of back off and understand what they're talking about, because the government does not understand what they're talking about a lot of times because they don't have these experts. I mean, look at what happened when Charles came to talk with Congress. I mean, some of these guys are just sitting there, well, but what about the flux capacitor? Like, completely clueless, and it's just a matter of influencing educated legislation, especially in this particular instance, because we will have regulation. I mean, this cannot be completely deregulated. It just can't, right? It can't be deregulated forever. But there is such a thing as stupid regulations and such a thing as smart regulations protecting people from being scammed.
Yep. I mean, in some respects, I really kind of wish the SEC would back off. I mean, it's kind of, especially with the lack of clarity and this idea of enforcement, regulation through enforcement. It's just, I'm keeping my eyes peeled on this XRP thing because it looks to me like, they might get the wrist slapped a little bit. But I got to be careful with these rabbit holes because I can talk to you about all kinds of stuff. And I want to talk to you about the Solaris portal that you mentioned. What exactly is white label software as a service?
Okay, so what is one of the great barriers that stops people from the average business owner, that kind of consumer, small to mid-sized business, which is where the bulk of mass adoption always lies, small to mid-sized business for anything, really. What stops them? It's the, well, I mean, okay, why don't you take a crack at it?
I would say, having started my own business, the red tape to define where my company is going to be headquartered and what kind of company it's going to be, LLC, and to get all that paperwork in. And I actually just paid someone to do it for me. But
well, I mean, more specifically, using blockchain, right? Using blockchain services.
Probably a lack of education. Services,
traceability. Exactly. It's intimidating. It's intimidating for people because you go and you see these, billion-dollar ecosystems and these really big words thrown around, and you have no idea what they're talking about. and you just figured out how to set up a wallet, and you really still don't understand why this thing has value in your wallet. Why would somebody pay money for it? What else are you going to do with it? So what do? Well, you have a lot of people that want to utilize things like run administrative services using the blockchain, do things like traceability solutions, for example, using the blockchain. A small business that doesn't have millions of dollars to pay for a full-blown traceability solution, but wants to use a traceability solution for, say, stock updates and warehouse updates. Where do people like this go? Well, people like this will be able to go to Solaris. And Solaris is basically a way to create a suite of solutions aimed just for small and mid-sized businesses without coding. It's just business logic. It's just all going to be business logic, drag and drop, point and click. Are you familiar with Zoho?
No, I'm not.
Zoho. Okay, well, Zoho is a pretty popular CRM, or even say WordPress, for example. Okay, WordPress, right? People know WordPress or Wix, and it's going to be a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit more robust than that, but that's the idea. With Wix, right, or with WordPress, you don't really need to know how to code. You don't really need to.
Something like Marlowe?
You can build something like Marlowe, yeah, in a way. But it's just about creating enough, understanding business enough, and creating enough components and plugins and tools for somebody to create a solution. And it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be traceability, is going to be administrative solutions, it's going to be identity solutions, something that can be created by simply employing business logic in the solution, and then template it through so that you can then assemble the app that is going to be running it, the different components that are going to be running it together in a suite for yourself, for your personal business, and run it using the platform, and basically utilize blockchain in your everyday business without having to know how to program a blockchain. Everything from the individual modules that are going to be running and reporting, say, for example, a traceability solution, they're going to be reporting the different statuses of their merchandise stock and where it is and what it's doing, to the actual app that is going to be running and showing things to their end user. Okay, say, for example, if it's like a niche beverage company, or something like that, showing the end user where it came from, where the product came from, having their own, being able to use their own branding in the app, in the DApp, and just really being able to create something that looks professional, it is powerful, that is very usable, that will help their business grow, that utilizes the blockchain, that you don't need to employ a 20-person crew of developers to actually create for you.
Awesome. My favorite project, though, that you mentioned is the Commodities Decentralized Exchange. What's the story here? I mean, how did you think this up, and how's it going to work exactly?
Well, so I was thinking, there's been a lot of talk about tokenization, and I've always been a fan of utility NFT usage. Because of course I understand the importance of IP and using NFTs for IP and for IP management. I don't discount that as a good use case for NFTs, okay? Because I'm like, oh, it's just JPEGs. Well, it's art, I mean, it could be JPEGs, but it could also it's just like any art, it's a digital representation of a piece of art, intellectual property. However, I think because so many people got stuck on that, they are really neglecting, not everybody, of course, because there's other companies that are developing it, utility NFTs and using other functionalities of NFTs. By a large part, the true power of the NFT is being neglected. And I thought to myself, okay, well, what if I could create a tokenized commodity DEX? So why commodities? Well, commodities is something that already has an established traceability paradigm. It has an established logistical paradigm. There's many years of knowledge there that we can then digitize and put into this. And so why not create something where you have basically an exchange, right? So think of a crypto exchange, right? But instead of crypto, you're trading commodities. But really what these commodities are just NFTs with attached conditions. So essentially, you're creating a marketplace where, just like we say, like OpenSea, for example. And of course, the solution is a lot more robust than this, because it's a tokenized commodity DEX that is going to be coupled with it's a highly modifiable and almost it's in a way a traceability and logistical solution that you can dial in. So it's not just going to be trading futures contracts like the legacy market, although that is something that you're going to be able to do as well. But also, I think that the second part that's being neglected here is the ability to attach a traceability and logistics chain to this that can be modifiable. That a company can dial in what they want it to be. Like, for example, they want it to be a greener chain, if they want it to be a more frugal chain, if they want it to be a more expedient chain, they can then dial it in with an aggregate. So also, this is not just an innovative idea. It is also an aggregate of other ideas that by themselves weren't really that profitable. Like, for example, just straight traceability is really not that profitable, right? You have to figure out an extra part to your business that would incentivize people to really care about traceability. And you do that with different incentives, with promotions, with loyalty points, things like that, right? So in an average business, if you're just doing like a B2C type of solution. But the reality of it is that a lot of traceability solutions are just not that profitable by themselves, but they are profitable and they can be very powerful in tandem with other things, like logistics chains, like contract chains, like a tokenized commodity exchange that will utilize the traceability and that will then be able to later on be available for that company's consumer to see where their product came from. So it can be a multi-level. It's a B2B, B2C type of chain that can be established just by incorporating it into this aggregate system. And so it's a complex system, but it's a lot of it just makes sense. And this is not something that can be done with a flip of a switch, because people ask me, well, why? What if somebody else goes out there and does the same thing as you? Well, as our Cardano head of communities, Ms. Johannan, says, you can't copy ecosystems, which is why I am not afraid of somebody coming in there and then swooping away what I thought up, because there's so many moving parts to it that are unique to because my connections and my experience are also a big part of being able to utilize this ecosystem. It is to create this ecosystem. I have a lot of connections with governments. I have a lot of connections with different companies. Also my, my co-founders and people that are working with me on Zengate, they're also very well trained in the markets. They understand processes very, very well. So it's a combination of all these things, an aggregate solution that is really going to make this a powerful ecosystem. And it's also an aggregate in a way where it's not just going to be, like I said, it's not going to be a flip of a switch and everything is available. We're going to start with an MVP, and we're going to keep adding services. We're going to keep adding regulatory agencies that need to be that people need to deal with when they're exporting and importing goods. We're going to add trade associations to this that they need to liaison with. We're going to add port authorities. We're going to onboard commodities individually to make sure that we preserve the nuances in each commodity trade. Because, for example, as I said before, and I think I said it in the video, say something like Sri Lankan tea trade is different from Georgian wine trade. And that is different from Thai silk trade or Thai rice trade. All of these are very nuanced, and these nuances have to be saved in order for the people that are now using the legacy system to buy, sell, and trade these commodities to be able to actually switch over to this and really see that this is better. So it cannot be like a really steep barrier of entry. This has to mimic, this has to be familiar to them. This has to be something where they're kind of stepping into this, and it's like they're stepping out of the space shuttle into the into the Enterprise. It's like, whoa, it's a spaceship as well, but it's much bigger and it goes faster and it can do more stuff with it. They still know how to fly it. That's the idea behind it.
Final question, Dan. You work with both Cardano and Ergo, and your development history in blockchain spans years. I'd love to have a debate on this one day with actual economists. But in light of your work history with both consensus protocols, which one, Dan? Proof of work or proof of stake? Which is better?
That's.
Can you even say, working for both of them?
Well, listen, it's just, who's better, Mozart or Bach? They're different. It's a personal preference. It's a use case type of preference. Some use cases are better for proof of work. Some use cases are better for proof of stake. Proof of stake is more democratic. Proof of work is more straightforward. You have the machinery, you can gain the hash rate, you can mine more. Proof of stake is you have decentralization using your staking pools. You have delegators to the staking pools. You create incentives to get those delegators to the staking pools. You secure the network that way. And like I said, it's all use cases. It's all different. I don't think that there's a better. One is better than the other. Although I know there's debates out there about proof of work and power consumption or proof of stake and decentralization. I do believe that everybody has a place in what we're doing.
Dan Friedman, creator, CEO, and owner of Zengate Global, a suite of software products and portals designed to bring wide-scale commercial and public adoption of Ergo and the Ergo blockchain. Dan, thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck with this project. Please come back and update us as it matures.
It was my pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was a long interview, and I'm really grateful for it, but I would love to know what you think. YouTube Analytics often says people hate really long interviews, but the personal feedback I'm getting is to do them. So either way, it's all time-coded in the description so you can see topics and jump to what interests you. And on that note, it is about time for us to sign off. Thank you so much for tuning in. please check out the audio-only version of our podcast on all major podcast outlets. We appreciate the likes and the comments and would love to hear from you on what you would like to see in the future. You can also hit us up on Twitter at Proof of Ergo. We would love to hear from you there as well. I'm James Kever. This is Proof of Ergo, episode 9. We will see you next show.